for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. I'm Erin Cargile in for Josh Hinkle. This week, we are taking a closer look at one of the most controversial aspects of schooling in Texas, testing. Some say we need it to know which schools are succeeding and which schools are failing. Others say it puts too much pressure on children. Across Texas, students have wrapped up taking the STAR exams despite some technical issues. On Tuesday, the Texas Education Agency tells us some students could not log on to the online exams. Others got kicked off in the middle of the test. TEA tells us most of the students were able to take the test later in the week. And high school students in Round Rock had a similar issue last month, but the cause was a campus Wi-Fi issue. This week, lawmakers in the Texas House approved a plan to let students graduate even if they do not pass all of their standardized exams. A student could fail 2 of the 5 STAR tests and still get their diploma if they get the green light from a panel of teachers, counselors, parents, and principals. KXAN's Phil Prazen has more on the proposal lawmakers are trying to fast track.
Schools put a lot of pressure on these kids to do well.
Hillary Prochno's son, Truman, spent the day at home. She told his school he won't be coming in to take the STAR test.
I'm worried about the fact that my children are being exposed to test preparation for a great part of the school year instead of meaningful learning activities.
Here at Robert E. Lee Elementary School, students are currently taking the STAR test, and kids in Texas will take it every year until high school, where currently around 25,000 high school seniors won't graduate because they haven't passed all their tests.
And we need to see desperately that more of our students graduate from high school career or college ready. And this goes in the exact opposite direction.
Bill Hammond from the Texas Association of Business says year after year, lawmakers drop the number of tests because school districts discover their kids don't know what they should.
That they weren't getting the job done. And so what they did was they scared mom. They told mom that Johnny was not going to be able to go to UT because of the tests, which of course couldn't have been further from the truth.
But Hillary hopes one day her 4th grader will graduate without the pressure of a test. Phil Prazen, KXAN News.
The bill now heads to a conference committee where members will iron out the differences between the House and Senate versions. Both chambers have to give a final okay, then Governor Abbott is expected to sign it into law. For more than a year, we have told you about the growing movement of opt-out of our parents who are opting their kids out of the standardized tests. But in order to do that, parents must keep their children at home on test days and make up test days. We found out not many are taking that step. Attendance numbers from Austin ISD show more than 6,000 students were tested on March 30th. That day, only 15 students were absent. In the 8th grade, more than 5,300 students were tested at AISD and 39 students were absent. About 3/4 of 5th and 8th graders passed their STAR exams in reading this spring. The TEA released the data while more 5th graders passed this year than last. The passing rate dropped about 5% among 8th graders. By state law, students in those 2 grades must pass the STAR reading test to move on to the next grade. Those who failed can retake the test next month with a 3rd chance in June. And Austin's police chief is also voicing his opinion about education. This week, Chief Art Acevedo said boosting funding for pre-K could help deter crime. It was during a news conference at the Uphouse Early Childhood Center. Acevedo says if children do not attend pre-K, they are already left behind.
It's a full day, and the expectations and the skills that they must have when they enter kindergarten are huge compared to what it was 40 years ago, 45 years ago.
Recently, the House passed a measure that would increase funding for half-day pre-K, but it's currently held up in the Senate. A group of advisors to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said pre-kindergarten bills in the Capitol will take children away from parents and put them in a godless environment. The Lieutenant Governor told our media partner, the Texas Tribune, he did not know about the letter before it went out. His grassroots advisory board, made up mostly of Tea Party activists, said parents have the right to raise their children with minimal intrusion from the state. They say pre-K takes children out of their homes and religious preschools. The letter does create a somewhat awkward situation since pre-K was one of Governor Greg Abbott's main campaign issues. The Tribune reports the issue came up during a breakfast earlier this week between the governor, lieutenant governor, and House Speaker Joe Straus. Well, parents who want to send their kids to private school but can't afford it may soon get some help. The state Senate gave the green light to create a scholarship program funded by business donations. This is a variation of what's commonly called vouchers. Those who oppose it say it is sending the wrong message about public education. Last week on this program, the bill's author, Senator Larry Taylor, told us it's about helping low-income families.
For some parents, for their particular child in their particular situation, they need an option. They need something different.
It sends a message to parents encouraging them to abandon their local school as opposed to support their local school, rally around that school if it has a difficult population, and improve it.
The bill passed in the Senate and will now head to the State House. A closer look at the STAR exams and the backlash against them. Joining me this morning is State Representative Jason Isaac from the Dripping Springs area. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Erin. It's great to be here.
Great to be talking to you this morning. I know a few weeks back, it's probably been a month here at the beginning of the session, I was interviewing you. We were doing a story on STAR testing. You were at a community meeting out in the Dripping Springs area,
yes,
in Wimberley, talking to parents there. And of course, that was early on in the session. So first, get me up to speed with your education bills directly involving STAR testing and where those are at. Have you made any headway?
We have made some progress, yes. And I filed a bill that's very similar to a bill that Representative Dan Huberty has filed, and his bill is making progress. We hope to have it on the floor within the next week or two, really limiting the amount of testing times that kids can have sitting in the seats. Right now, you could have a third grader that's taking a test that could be in that seat for 4 hours. And that's just way too long for a third grader to be in a test. So that bill that I filed would limit kids to testing 3rd through 5th grades to no more than 2 hours. And then kids in 6th through 8th grade no more than 3 hours for a test. Excuse me. And we really shouldn't be able to test kids any longer than that. It's just not a good thing to have kids sitting that long. There's too much stress is the issue that I've heard with the parents that I serve in the legislature is they're spending too much time taking one test. We need to be focusing them on their education and their future, not preparing them to take one test.
Yeah, when I called the Texas Education Agency about that particular issue, they said, well, that's not the full picture, because maybe the student, you have a window of time to take the test, but really they're finishing in an hour or two, and the rest of the time they're sitting there maybe reading a book. But some are taking the full time.
That's correct, and that's great. So if they're not having any issues, there's no reason our legislation shouldn't pass that says that 85% of the students would have to be able to complete those tests within 2 hours, again, grades 3 through 5, or 3 hours, grades 5 through 6.
Okay, graduation requirements. We talked about this earlier on the show. Are you in favor of this bill that would allow some high school students to still graduate even if they don't pass all of their STAR end of course exams?
Absolutely. This raises a much bigger issue that really these decisions should be made at the local level anyways. I filed a bill that would allow school districts to choose which tests that they want to administer. So could they choose STAR? Sure, they could, but they could choose any one of other 9 nationally normed standardized tests. Those decisions should be made at the school level, at the district level. The legislators shouldn't be telling school districts how to run themselves. We need to let them have the freedom, and really they're independent school districts. We need to give them that independence. So last week we passed in the House a measure that of the 5 end of course tests that are required, students could possibly not do very well on 2 of them, but they could be honor roll students. And that's the exact case that I had in Blanco County with a student that missed an end of course test his freshman year by 1 question, did remediation throughout the summer, and did worse at the end of the summer. And now would have to continue to take that test every year, although he's not studying the material, and likely to continue to do worse on it. Should 1 question on 1 test keep that student from not graduating? I don't think so, and this is an honor roll student. So some people just don't test very well in these lengthy 4-hour end of course tests that have 54 questions. It's just not very appropriate. So again, I think the decision should be made at the local level. These are local elected administrators that are running these schools or are being hired by the trustees that are running the schools.
One more STAR question for you. Do you think this is the beginning to the death of STAR? Those on the other side are saying we've got to have accountability. This test that we spent so much time and money creating is now, you know, being undermined.
It really is, and it's been a problem since we switched over from TAX to STAR, and it just takes too much time. We used to spend about 26 days of classroom preparation preparing students to take a test. Now we spend 46 to 47 days, a quarter of the school year, preparing students to take a test. It's too much stress. It's too much emphasis on taking one test when, again, we should be preparing the students for their future. I hope it's not necessarily the end of STAR, but the beginning of freedom at local school districts where they can decide how to test and educate our students at the local level. Every school district is different. You shouldn't have to come into Austin to get the freedom that you should have already at your local schools.
That's interesting. Real quick, I have a friend who's an elementary school teacher, and she was telling me not only is there a lot of test prep time, but the test can be taken on a computer now. And some of these elementary students aren't really familiar with test taking on a computer, so that's a whole nother issue that they've got to spend a lot of classroom time teaching them how to test online.
So we've got to train them how to take the test. Not only are we going to try to educate them on the material in the test, we're going to train them how to take the test.
So we've only got a couple more minutes left, but I know there's a lot more going on at the Capitol that you're passionate about beyond education. Let's talk about this propane issue that you've taken on. We've covered it extensively here on KXAN, where homeowners who purchase a home, they may have in some fine print that from the developer that they've got to go with a certain propane company. Their hands are tied and they can't get out of it.
Correct. So, and it's actually a neighborhood that I serve that's in the district that I live in. We're a captive community-based propane system, and there are several of these around the state of Texas. There's clearly been a need for them where people want to be able to have propane in their servicing their homes, but they don't want tanks on their property. So the neighborhoods, when they're developed, they create a community-based propane system so we can get delivery to our homes. But there's some things, you're right, there's some fine print in there that you may have not seen on your closing because before 2011, it didn't have to be disclosed to you. And so that law, fortunately, we were able to fix that, but you're required to buy propane from these providers. So I filed 3 bills this legislative session, one that would allow these tanks on properties, another one that would get us out of our restrictive covenants. Because right now, if you want to opt out of propane, let's say you're building a new home and you want to go with all electric appliances, then you'd have to pay a $950 fee to the propane provider. So you really have to buy your way out of doing business with a propane provider. And then another one really limits the amount of time that can be charged for your bill. We're seeing sometimes, I've had constituents tell me they have bills that go from 19 days, some billing cycles, and up to 40 in other billing cycles. And if you're going to stretch a billing cycle out for 40 days during the winter, the time when you're using the most propane, your bill is could potentially double, even though it's only a 30% increase in the number of days. But during that period of time, you could see just a devastating increase in your bill. So I think the one that we're going to see is most successful is going to limit the number of days it can be in a billing cycle, very similar to other regulated industries, electric and natural gas, where we'll get some more regulation and protection for the consumers with regards to community-based propane systems. So I think we're going to see a bill pass that really limits the number of days that can be charged in a billing cycle for community-based propane systems.
Got it. And they're giving us a little bit more time because this stuff is so interesting. So a couple more minutes to go. I want to get to this concrete batch plant topic. First off, you have some very passionate people in your district.
Yes, I
Every
do.
meeting we show up to, there are 100+ people. They come out in numbers.
They do.
And they are ready to fight. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this, there's someone who wants to come in and put a concrete batch plant. Those who live and work around that area are concerned about the noise, the pollution, some of the health concerns that they're raising. Where is this at, and why are you involved?
Yes, and as an elected official, a state representative, I have constituents that will ask me, can you do a letter requesting a meeting with TCEQ? And if I get an overwhelming number of people that ask for this meeting with TCEQ, then we set up a public meeting where the public has an opportunity to weigh in to TCEQ. It's part of the process with TCEQ that could lead to ultimately a contested case where people think this is not a good place to do this. There are air quality issues, there's truck traffic issues, there's safety issues, and so it really gives people another voice. They could write letters to TCEQ during the open comment period, and a lot of that happened, and TCEQ required an extension of the open comment period. They felt it wasn't posted in a proper neighborhood that had circulation in the Dripping Springs area.
Yeah, there was concern that it was printed in the wrong newspaper in a wrong town.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and that was the case. And so when that happened, we opened up the comment period. TCEQ was overwhelmed with comments, and then they received my letter that said, we're going to have a public meeting on this before you issue any permits. So it's really stopped the permitting process at this point in time, and now we're waiting. We were going to have a public meeting sometime last week, but we've got to let the constituents know ahead of time. We've got to find a location that can hold the people that want to have their voice heard. And right now we're looking sometime after session if and when a public meeting is held. And I say if because there's a possibility that this project doesn't move forward at all in this particular area.
Okay, a lot of things going on. You've got, what, 3 weeks or so left in the session?
Yeah, I think we're down to about 36 days, 37 days.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is this the most exciting time that the rubber hits the road?
This is the busiest time because there's things that you've been working on all session long, and you really have until right about May 12th, May 14th, I think, are our deadlines to where we have to have those bills on the floor. So this is the most critical time in the session right now. Water has been the #1 issue. Education has been really the #2 focus, but I've got other people in the House that are carrying bills that I support. And so water really has been the #1 focused issue so far this session, House District 45, to make sure that we bring all of our groundwater into protection.
Good luck, Representative Jason Isaac. Thank you for taking time with us this morning.
Thank you, Erin. My pleasure.
All right, thank you for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. And remember, you can join us every Sunday morning in the 8:30 half hour for a broader look at Texas politics.